Welcome to day 17 of the 2022 Puzzle Advent Calendar. As I'm sure you already know, this is a daily collaboration from December 1st to 24th across more than a dozen puzzling YouTube channels. Don't forget to subscribe to the next person in the series, and check out the playlist linked in the description below. There's an artwork floating around that most of you have probably seen, the melting Rubik's Cube. While it doesn't really make for a usable puzzle if replicated exactly, I wanted to make an interpretation of the idea that would still be just a fun cube to solve. The nice thing about this concept is that it's not set in stone, this is just one possible configuration. It's a fully functional 3x3, except it has curved cuts on the melted section that can block the puzzle from moving. To show you what I mean, here's three parts of the melted 3x3. If you look at this edge and this corner, you'll see that if we manipulate them like this, obviously you can turn one next to each other. And then if we put it on the other side, you can still turn it just fine. And if you put it on this side, you can also turn it fine with this corner as well. However, you'll notice that despite the fact that they line up when the turn is fully made, these parts are actually blocked if you try and make a turn this way, or if you're coming from this end in this way. And I think this is what's really going to make this puzzle interesting. Obviously in this case, you could obviously just make a turn all the way around the puzzle until you get back to here. But what I'm hoping is the fact that you'll have a bunch of these different pieces all around the puzzle. But yeah, if it was just these two pieces, and every other part was normal, you would be able to just do something like that, like a flip. I know the cube in the artwork is scrambled, but for simplicity, I made this one have its correct shape in the solved state. The cube is tilted towards an edge, in this case the blue edge, with the green one being the tall one. I could have also tilted it towards a corner instead of towards an edge, and that might have honestly made for a more difficult solve, but I think this configuration is a good baseline. And based on how this solves, I can create potentially more variations in the future. If you like interesting and unique custom puzzles such as this, like and subscribe. But now, let's look at the melting 3x3's design. At its core, the melting 3x3 is a straightforward 3x3 extension mod. You can see that each piece of the extension mod maps to one piece of the internal 30mm 3x3. If you're wondering how I generated the melted shape at the bottom of the cube, I basically just made a sketch in which I kind of drew what I wanted it to look like, and then I just extruded it, and then combined it with the rest of the puzzle, which was pretty straightforward to generate. But wait, there's actually two sketches. Yeah, so basically this puzzle uses two different cut sketches on each axis. The cut sketches only diverge beyond the physical 57mm cube, so only the melted section is actually going to see the effects of this. But what it basically means is that some parts will not be able to pass by each other, which was my intention. I think this will make it really interesting to solve. So here's some parts that I've already sanded. And my issue with this is this puzzle's curved sections are just absolutely insanely difficult to sand. So you can see that the layer lines go like this. So obviously to sand them properly, you want to sand in this direction. And I guess I could have printed this differently, but honestly this was by far the best orientation in which to print this. So it's basically impossible for me to sand it like this unless I figure out some new sanding techniques. So what I'm hoping is the stickers will stay on okay, and I am still going to spray this with clear coat regardless. What I was initially going to do is sand every piece individually and then assemble the puzzle, because I was thinking if I'm going to sand these curved parts, I want to kind of sand them all individually to get better access to them. But if the curved parts are basically impossible to sand anyway, what's the point? So what I'm thinking is I'm just going to assemble the puzzle fully and then sand it normally and then spray it with clear coat. So let's get to it. With regards to assembly, I would say that the melting 3x3 ended up being fairly uneventful. It's the same as most 3x3 extension mods. You take the 3D printed part, you put some super glue on it, and then you put it on the 30mm 3x3. or whatever other 3x3 you decide to use for extension mods. I used the Moyu one. I've been told that the Chi one is a little better. There's also the Gan one. A lot of these other options didn't really exist when I started making 3x3 extension mods, and I still have like a good amount of the Moyu ones, so I'm probably going to run through those until I start experimenting with different variants, but I don't know. I do think it'll be interesting to try and make the same puzzle with a Moyu 30mm 3x3, a Gan one, and a Chi one, and see which one is ultimately the best, but that's for the future and relatively unimportant because I'm sure all of these 30mm 3x3s turn pretty decently. But yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say about the assembly process is that I find it's easiest to first glue on the corners and then the edges and then the centers. I didn't film any of the stickering process, so I'll just talk about it now. I used the vinyl cutter to cut the 57mm 3x3 stickers and also the stickers on the melted parts. However, where I didn't use a vinyl cutter is the curved sections. Onshape doesn't really have a great way of exporting curved sections to a flat face. I believe SolidWorks has this feature, but Onshape does not. So there's no trivial way to design a curved sticker template in Onshape. I do have an idea of how I could have done it, but I was running out of time to make this puzzle, so the quickest way was for me to just hand cut the stickers for the curved sections. And honestly, it was quite a mess. I ended up sacrificing some aesthetic quality by putting some overlapping stickers on that section. And honestly, if you look at it up close, it's kind of gross, at least in my opinion. But I'm sure on camera it'll look fine because the camera quality is obviously not as vibrant as real life. And also, going by past statistics, only 20% of you are even going to hear me saying any of this. So these messy stickers can just be our secret. I'm inside a building and I'm still getting rained on. I wonder why. Alright, let's try and wrap this up before this cube gets too wet and all the stickers start peeling off. So how did the melting 3x3 turn out? Overall, this was kind of an experiment from my end because I've always been fascinated by that melting Rubik's Cube artwork, and I've thought, okay, so what if we try and make that into a real puzzle? This is a fairly tame implementation, to be honest, because it's mostly just a functional Rubik's Cube with some additional bandaging. The bandaging did turn out to be quite interesting during the solve, and I definitely will be solving this multiple times, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there's plenty of other variations that could be made of this concept. And I'm thinking maybe in the future I can explore if there's other variations that might have more interesting bandaging of some sort. Artistically, this melting 3x3, honestly, looking back at it, I'm not insanely happy with it. I think it could have looked a little nicer if I maybe made some different styling choices. But at the same time, I didn't spend that much time designing this puzzle, and I didn't have time because I think I started designing this December, what was it, like 7th? So I just didn't have time to make something more elaborate, but if I had more time, I would have loved to kind of make it look a bit nicer. But I mean, it looks fine, it solves interestingly, so overall I can't call that a failure. If you watch the design section, you'll know that the transition line between the inner and outer cuts of the puzzle is fairly steep, much steeper than I'd usually design it. And this was necessitated due to the fact that the melted section is a bit tilted. But due to this, the puzzle gets a bit catchy. That's a bit annoying, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's not super bad. So that's enough talking. Let's try and scramble the melting 3x3 before the sun sets. Well, the sun is setting, or has been setting. I have lost all of the light in this room. So let's get out of this creepy cabin and go solve this thing. I've solved the melting 3x3 a few times by now. The first time I started with the melted layer and ended with the regular layer. That worked out pretty decently almost up until the end, where some of the corner orientation algorithms basically didn't work because these bottom layer pieces, which were already solved, got to positions where pieces couldn't pass each other. And then I tried solving it with this as the first layer, and that turned out a little better, but it was still kind of frustrating. So this time I think I'm going to try something different. I'm going to put the melted layer on maybe like the left side, and that way maybe maneuverability will improve. I honestly have no clue. This thing is really weird to solve because of the way it bandages. So yeah, I've inspected this, so now I'll get started. When I was nearly done with the first two layers, it dawned on me that technically the yellow center does have an orientation. And normally on a 3x3 this wouldn't be that big of a problem, right? There's a fairly easy and simple sequence of moves you could do to just move all of the relevant parts out of the way, turn your center, and then put everything back. So I tried that on the melting 3x3, and just no matter what I tried, parts blocked. So in essence, I had to just resolve the entire first two layers, which was a pretty big setback, but it's also on me for forgetting that the yellow center needed to be oriented. I know there's an algorithm you can use to just orient centers separately from other parts, but I wasn't about to go pause and look that up at the end of the solve, so I wanted to do it as part of the first two layers. Well, that was probably one of the most frustrating first two layers solves to watch, but Thankfully, now it's all set. Did you see how in the middle of an algorithm I had to kind of backtrack and modify the algorithm mid-solve and figure out a different sequence of moves that would get the pieces to their intended destinations? It was kind of fun, honestly. It might be a bit frustrating that the parts block each other, so you can't make turns. So then you have to essentially figure out what type of blockage is it. Is it that parts can't pass by each other? Is it that they can't pass by each other this way, but they can like this way? Or is it the fact that the two parts physically can't occupy the same space when a turn is made? Another thing that doesn't help is this puzzle's a bit catchy, and so sometimes it can be a little hard to tell whether or not a turn is illegal or not. Like right there, I thought that this was catching, but no, it was actually this. So this illustrates what I was talking about. So if I try and come in and make this turn, well, if I were to get past that and come in here, I wouldn't be able to get into this position because you can see this is tucked in on the bottom side of this. And it couldn't come in from the top, even though this is a perfectly valid configuration. So yeah, that's kind of fun. You just have to figure out what type of blockage you're getting and then how to get around it. But definitely not great for speed solving. In any case, now that the first two layers are done, I'm interested in seeing how easy or difficult the last layers are going to be. Remember, when I solved the melted layers first, the last layer became really difficult to solve because these pieces started blocking up when you started using them in algorithms. And when I solved this white layer first, actually the last layer turned out to be pretty easy, but it was the first two layers that were an utter nightmare. So I'm hoping that because the first two layer melted parts are just kind of off to the side here, maybe that will make the process easier. Or maybe it'll still catch, because if you look here, this is oriented up and this is oriented up. I think that's actually kind of a lack of foresight on my part, because if I solved these two layers first and left this for the last layer, then I think nothing would have been blocked because these are facing down. But these are facing up, so you can see that they do get blocked. So I don't know, we'll see. I will say that once I actually get the quarters oriented, this won't be a problem, which in this method that's the last step, so I envision problems. And here we are, the melting Rubik's Cube, melting 3x3, melted 3x3, whatever you want to call this, is finally solved. During the last layer, what I did is actually something that I think saved me a lot of frustration, is basically a lot of these algorithms that you do to the last layer, it doesn't really matter in what orientation the first two layers are. I thought about the algorithm, I thought like what layers are mostly going to move in the algorithm, and then whatever part I needed to start from, I basically moved it away from this melted layer over here on that side. And I think that really allowed me to avoid a lot of interference between the parts. Manipulating these parts on the top layer was still quite frustrating, but in the end we got through it. And genuinely, as I'm solving this puzzle more, I'm having a lot more fun with it than my first solve, where I was kind of in a rush because during stickering I accidentally scrambled it and was trying to quickly get it solved again so that I could finish stickering it. But that quick solve was just a dream. Overall, I'm super happy with this. This, while frustrating to solve initially, was a really solid experience in the end, and I think definitely a great puzzle for the Advent calendar. Thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the person who's uploading tomorrow's video in the Advent calendar, linked below. Check out the playlist, and have a great day.